In today's video, we're going to take a look at a new piece of video production hardware I've bought, which is the Blackmagic Video Assist 7-inch 12G HDR external monitor and recorder. Now I will say that, just for people finding this video, especially if you found it through search or recommendations, I'm not a videographer, I just produce videos for this channel, so I'm not an expert in this sort of stuff. I'm not going to be talking about this from like a cinematic or video production perspective. I've got a somewhat unique, niche, weird use case for this, so I'll be talking about it in the way I'll be using it to produce videos on my channel. So at the start I'm going to talk about why I've got this and my reasoning for it, but if you're interested in just seeing the product, I put chapters in the video description and on the video seek bar, so feel free to skip ahead past any bits that I'm rambling about my particular use case if you just want to see the product itself. But yeah, about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I bought myself a new camera for my channel, which is a Panasonic X1500 camcorder. Previously, I'd always used mirrorless cameras and then recorded my audio separately using a PCM recorder. However, I decided I wanted a bit of a change, I wanted to go to 4K, and rather than going and getting another mirrorless, I thought I would try out a camcorder. Going for a camcorder simplified a lot of things. It comes with a good lens out of the box, it's got really good stabilisation, so I didn't need to use my gimbal as much to do handheld shots. It's a nice form factor for carrying it and things like that. It's actually worked out really well. And at the time, one of my reasons for buying this particular model and buying the additional top handle was to get XLR input for my microphone. However, at the time when I first tested it out, I did notice that the noise floor on the XLR inputs was quite high. So I kind of just got around that by using a noise reduction plugin, and it all seemed fine. However, I think it was my most recent video, the thermal camera one, I was sitting on a train trying to just review the footage and just find the chapter markers. So because I was on a train, I had my earphones in. And I'd never really listened to one of my own videos on earphones before. And because obviously they're much closer to my ears and a bit more sensitive, I really noticed how bad the noise floor sounded. Normally when I edit videos, I just use speakers, so I don't really notice the noise, and I thought the noise reduction plugin was getting rid of the noise quite well. But listening through earphones made me realise that the noise reduction plugin does bring the noise floor down, but also sounds absolutely terrible. Like the noise floor sounds really digital and sort of compressed, it sounds weird. And the audio you're listening to right now is recorded through the camera's XLR input, and I'll be using the standard noise reduction plugin configs that I used before. So I really wanted a way to improve the audio quality and get rid of that bad noise floor, or that high noise floor anyway. So I tried a lot of things with the current camera, I tried all the different gains, tried using a 3.5mm jack on the front that made it even worse. I just couldn't find a way to fix it. Because with the noise floor on this camera, no matter what the gain is set to, it's still very high, even at the lowest gain levels. It's only when you start maxing the gain out that the noise floor increases even more, but even at the lowest level, it's still pretty noticeable. So even with my microphone connected through an external Fethead Phantom preamp that I'm using, there's still a really high noise floor there. And then using the 3.5mm jack on the front instead of XLR, the noise floor sounded even worse. So basically I've come to the conclusion I can't record decent audio internally on this camera. I thought, well, I'll get a new camera. So looked at a lot of options, definitely was going to get quite expensive. But what I didn't realise is how good value the camera I've bought actually is. Because round about the £2,000 price point, which was my budget, there was really no other options that supported 4K 60 or 4K 50 recording internally. Most of them were much more expensive. Any other cameras around this price point were only 4K 30 or 4K 25. The only other option I could really find was the Panasonic X2 and the X20, which were models that had been released subsequently, so they were released after I bought my current one. And while they are potentially seen as a bit higher end, they've got bigger sensors, and they do have XLR inputs. I found a video review on one, and the person did test the XLR input, and it still sounded quite noisy to me, so I just didn't see the point of spending a lot of money on a new camera to find the audio input is just as bad as it is on my current one. Now, you may notice I've bought an external monitor and recorder here. Why am I not using an external PCM recorder? Well, that was an option. I do actually have one. I've got a Tascam DR40X I used to use with my old mirrorless camera. But I wanted to avoid having to record the audio and video separately, because the number of times I've lost footage by forgetting to start the audio recorder, or the audio recorder's died partway through shooting a long clip and I've not noticed it, I just didn't want to have to deal with that. I wanted to have one device that I can record on, and it records the audio and video simultaneously. So that's what this does. It's an external monitor that also records video over HDMI, and also has two XLR audio inputs. So what I can do with this is mount it on top of my camera, feed the video out of the camera into this over HDMI, connect my microphone over XLR, and the recording will be done in this, not within the camera. So that means that the audio and video is recorded simultaneously, I can't forget to record one, but on top of that, This also gives a few extra advantages over recording internally on the camera and recording the audio separately. And it better do because it was not cheap. Because this is an external recorder, it can actually record at higher quality than the camera can do internally. This camera supports H.265 and H.264 recording internally. It's got decent 10-bit recording, but in terms of the colour space, at 4K 50 and 4K 60, it can only record with a chroma subsampling of 420, and to get 422 chroma subsampling, you have to drop it down to 25 or 30 frames a second, whereas over its HDMI output, it can output 422 chroma subsampling at 4K 60 and 4K 50, and this can record that. So by using this as an external recorder, it can record more colour information. Now, if you've seen my videos, I don't really bother much about colour or production quality or video quality, or I'm not very good, I just sort of ramble into a camera and cut the clips together. So it's probably not super important, but technically speaking, this will record more colour information. Also, unlike the camera which records H.264 and H.265, which are relatively compressed, this can record a much higher quality codec, so you can record ProRes and DNX HD, it's called DNX HR. I'll probably end up using ProRes with this, and that's a much higher quality codec that's much quicker to work with. It requires a lot more storage space, but it is a lot more higher quality. So by using this, I will actually get a slight video quality improvement as well, potentially. This also supports Blackmagic RAW formats, which is even better. Essentially, it records raw footage from the camera, and with that, it means you can do things like adjust the white balance after the fact. There's a huge amount more information in there for adjusting the colours in the image. Now that requires certain cameras, which my camera doesn't support, so I won't be using RAW for now. However, in the future, whenever I upgrade my camera, my next approach, rather than getting another camcorder, probably will be to get a mirrorless that supports Blackmagic RAW on this, and then build up more of a sort of camcorder style rig around a mirrorless camera, so I've got the handling benefits of a camcorder. And when I do that, this will then be able to record RAW. But for now, ProRes is absolutely fine. So yep, that's the other benefit, is it will offer slightly better video quality. It's got the audio inputs, which I've not tested, but Blackmagic have stated on their website that it has a very low noise floor, so hopefully it's okay, fingers crossed, or it's a lot of money down the drain if not. Other benefits is a big external monitor. This is a 7-inch display, and this is something I was considering buying anyway. Obviously, before the audio issue, I was just going to get a monitor which is a bit cheaper than this, that has the recorder built in. But I was thinking about getting an external monitor, because the viewfinder, or the LCD in this camcorder isn't huge, and generally where I stand to film, I tend to end up standing to the right-hand side of the camera just because of how my room's laid out. And with the screen on the left of the camera, quite often I can't really see it, so a big external monitor would be beneficial as well. As a final benefit for this, not only can this record to SD cards, it can also record to a USB-C SSD, which should also be a nice benefit, because rather than recording to SD cards and having to ingest footage off them into my laptop, which is relatively slow, even with the UHS-2 cards that I use that are 250 megabytes a second read, what I could do instead with this is connect a relatively inexpensive USB-C SSD, something like a Samsung T7 or something. First of all, that's much higher capacity for the same price than the SD cards, but also in terms of read speeds, that can read up to about 1000 megabytes a second, so I can ingest the footage much quicker off of it, or even just edit straight off the USB SSD. So that'll be a nice little benefit as well. So ultimately that's why I've gone for this. So we'll take a look at it. Now, this is not a cheap product. This retails for around about £1,000. I got a relatively good deal on this. I think I paid about $850 on eBay for a sealed in box one. I think it was just a surplus stock someone had. So that was a pretty good deal. Still not cheap, but hopefully it solves the problem. And at least if it doesn't, at that price point, if I were to sell it on again, I'd kind of make my money back. But I'm hoping it will. And while it is a bit weird to use this with a camcorder, as I mentioned, going forward into the future, I would potentially be interested in building up some sort of mirrorless camera style rig. And when you're doing that, these things are ideal. These are very commonly used with mirrorless cameras because the recording is so much better and the big screen really helps. So yep, that's the seal taken off there. This is my first impressions, as I do with all my reviews. If I can, I like showing genuine first impressions, seeing it on camera because I've never seen this before in person. So if we open that up there, that's there. What other mention of this is there's also the Atomos recorders. They're also a common option. The reason I went for the Blackmagic one is because there's an advert for it. I edit in DaVinci Resolve. Now, if you're recording ProRes, it's not a huge deal, but if I did ever want to start working with RAW footage, Blackmagic RAW for me would make more sense than ProRes RAW because I edit in Resolve, not Final Cut. So yeah, that's my video editor there, Blackmagic Resolve, and also a sticker. cool. And here's the other parts. So there's the recorder itself. Pretty heavy, not the heaviest thing in the world, but it's going to make the camera quite heavy, but take a look at that in a second. What's under here? Box of bits. So this is cool, it's just a power adapter, that's fine. That's quite a nice sort of locking power connector, that's good. And if you look in here, we've got various plug-ins for the power adapter, so just stick the UK one on. That's very simple. Somehow. Should probably just do this off camera. There we go. Power adapter. And then finally, what's this under here? Don't know what this is. Oh. It's a battery charger. So, yep. The one thing is, I mean, one feature of this is it does run off 2 batteries. So you can use standard, I can't remember the exact model of them. This might say on it. No, it doesn't. It uses essentially standard Sony camcorder batteries, the type that are very commonly used in industry for things like video lighting panels. So you can put 2 batteries on the back of this to power it, or you can power it off the mains. Now it doesn't include the batteries. It's the same with LED panels. The batteries usually aren't included, but you can buy them separately quite inexpensively. But it does come with a charger. So I suppose that means, I presume you can't charge the batteries internally, which is a little bit annoying, but fine. I'll see, it might do it, I don't know. I've not got batteries yet, I'm just going to run it off the mains for now. I didn't see any point in investing in a lot of accessories for this until I've definitely tested it to actually solve my problem, because if I was to sell it again, having bought batteries and various other bits for it, that'd be a bit silly. But yeah, I'll probably get batteries in the future, but I'll run it off the mains for now. But yep, comes this battery charger, which interestingly is a properly generic little off-brand or unbranded little thing. It's not a Blackmagic one. In fact, for comparison, here is a battery charger that I bought for my old Sony A6000, which is like a super cheap little charger off Amazon. And essentially it's the exact same, just a micro USB there, and it just takes the battery. So I thought for, you know, such an expensive product they would include like their own charger for it, but I mean it works absolutely fine. It is just a cheap little USB charger and a USB cable. But yeah, that's the thing that will be interesting for such an expensive product. It comes with that. But yeah. Anyway, that's the battery charger. It's nice it comes with it, but ultimately quite often when you buy those batteries they come with a charger anyway because the chargers are so cheap. But anyway, yeah. That's it there. So now, here we have the device itself. So let's unbox this and see what it's like. I'm quite excited to see what this is, or what this is like, because I've never used something sort of as high-end as this, I suppose you could say. So it'll be interesting to see what the sort of feel and stuff is, because it's all this sort of thing that's designed to be mounted onto cameras, have additional accessories mounted onto it and all that sort of stuff. So yep, that's it in there. Just probably quite careful with the packaging just in case I do end up not using it and selling it on or something. Oh, there we go. So that's it there. So here's the device. We'll just peel the front off it if I can find the edge. There it is. There we go. So that's it there. So yep, fully metal construction, which is really good. And as you can see on the front, you've got a nice big 7-inch screen. It's actually a 16 by 10 screen, which means that I think part of the screen doesn't then get, so like most of the screen shows your image, and then a part of it that shows the sort of overlay doesn't actually eat into your image, which is nice. So yep, 7-inch 16 by 10 screen. I think it's a resolution of 1920 by 1200, I think. Got a little speaker there. Around this side, you can see you have the 2 SD card slots, so you can do dual recording. One card and then record to the other card, then back to this card, so you can kind of swap the cards out and keep recording continuously. Headphone output for monitoring. A link control output, so that's to link to sort of external remotes and stuff to start the recording. Power button. Power jack there. On the bottom, you've got your 3 mounting points and your USB-C port, which is a bit weird on the bottom, but I suppose it works. So that's where you can either connect to a computer for firmware updates, connect an external USB-C SSD to that, or with the latest firmware update, you can connect that to a computer and actually use it like a webcam to stream video from an HDMI device or an SDI device into your computer, which could make this really useful as well. And then finally on the other side, we've got the ports that I'll actually be using, where we've got 2 HDMI ports, 1 in, 1 out, so you can loop through it, SDI in and out for SDI, which I won't be using, but it's nice to have SDI. And then finally on the side here, you've got 2 mini XLR connections for the microphones. So they're not full-size XLR, they're just mini, but all you need is a relatively inexpensive cable to convert that. So I'll be using that to connect my microphone up. And this has full phantom power support and everything, so I can power my microphone from this. And in the back, you see you've got a cooling fan, so it'll be interesting to see how loud that is, and 2 battery compartments. And finally on top, there's these there. They're battery release buttons, that makes sense. I was like, why has it got shoulder buttons? Is it like a controller? But yeah, it's battery eject buttons. That's an LED to show it's recording, and then more mounting points to mount additional accessories to it. So yeah, that's it there. So what we'll now do is we'll power it up for the first time. Now obviously before I actually talk about my sort of impressions and do a full test of it and all that sort of stuff, I'll go away and actually use it for a bit. And I think what I'll do is kind of in the middle of this video, I'll go away, make another video on it, and when I come back with my full impressions at the end of the video, I'll have already used this to produce a full video. But we'll test it on camera just to see it fire up for the first time. So charger's connected, so turn the mains onto it. Power button side presumably will turn it on. Yep, that made a clicking sound. And there it is, so the screen's come on there, as you can see. Very bright actually, because that's the other benefit of this. I think the screen's 2,500 nits or something. It's a super bright screen, so if you're using this outside or under big studio lights, you'll be able to see the screen, which is good. So now if we plug HDMI from my camcorder into the HDMI input on the side, in theory, we should get a video signal. So it's set to SDI, so maybe I need to change the source. Yeah, source to HDMI. Back out of that. Or how do I get out? There we go. And there we go. So now we have HDMI from the camcorder showing on this. So what we'll now be able to do is put SD cards into this, record onto that or anything like that. But what I'll do now is I'll go away off camera, test this out properly, work out how the XLR inputs and stuff work, and I'll come back. But my first impressions right now is the build quality seems amazing. I'll need to change the camera's output because it's only output in 1080p, but that should be easy enough to change. And the screen looks absolutely amazing because I'm standing all the way back here, I'm standing miles back from it, but it's so sharp I can still read all the text. I can read all the text on the screen that's in the video. It's super high resolution, which is really good. So yeah, what I'll now do is I'll go away off camera, try it out, play about with it, maybe make a video using it, and I'll come back with my review. And we're back. So I've now been away, set this all up, used it for a while. In fact, I filmed an entire video on this and then edited that video. It's not out yet, but it will be coming. So I've fully tested this, so now I know how it all works, so we can come back and talk about it. And while this thing wasn't cheap, I'm very impressed with it. So we'll sort of go around, take a look at it work, and take a look at some of the features on it and how it works. Just a very brief look. There's much better, more in-depth videos on it, and we'll talk about how I found it. So yep, as you can see, we've got the recorder here, but if we look around the back, we'll see I've added a couple of batteries. So I ended up buying a set of batteries. I thought I could just run it off the mains for a while and just save money, but ultimately plugging it in was just a pain. For the sake of the cost of the batteries, which weren't that expensive, I thought I may as well get some. So these are just generic batteries. They're Sony, well, they're compatible with Sony NP5 F750s, so they're kind of the middle capacity. You can get smaller ones and larger capacity ones. This is the middle one, which gave the sort of good balance between sort of overall runtime and capacity while not being too heavy. So that's two batteries on the back of the recorder there. And I'll put links to these in the description. Now, one thing to bear in mind is this recorder can't charge the batteries, it can only run off them. That's quite common with things that take these batteries. So you'll need an external charger, but the kit that I bought also included a charger, which was actually quite nice. It's got a LED readout, it can charge over micro USB, USB-C, or it has a built-in USB cable, so that's quite neat. So yeah, I'll put a link to this in the description. So that's a couple of batteries. Now, with these batteries installed, I've not tested them to full depletion yet, but what I did was basically set it recording for, so I think half an hour or something, and then measured how much the batteries had dropped. And I roughly calculated that I'd get round about 100 minutes to 120 minutes record time, so about 2 hours, which coincidentally is about the same amount of time I could record onto a terabyte of storage. So realistically, that'll be fine. What's also quite nice is when it depletes the batteries, it depletes one of them completely and then switches to the other battery. So you can quite easily hot swap the batteries on the go while always keeping one fully charged in the device. That's pretty good. So yeah, I went for the batteries there. I also ended up spending a small fortune on other accessories, for example for storage. Now, as I mentioned, this can record onto SD cards. However, with ProRes encoding, this thing uses really high bit rates. In fact, I worked out for about 2 hours of footage at ProRes 422. That would use about a terabyte of storage. So using the 128 gig SD cards I was using before wasn't really going to cut it. So while I could have got bigger SD cards, I decided to go down a different route and bought an external SSD. So this is a Samsung T7. These are quite widely available and they're not that expensive. You can get these on sale, so for this 1TB one you can usually find them for around about £90 if they're on sale. So it's worth keeping an eye out for that. Which makes it cheaper than an SD card, but also much faster. Because while it's not obviously as small and portable, it's a much larger device. This has a 10GB USB-C interface, So you can actually read and write to this at about a gigabyte a second, which is really impressive, much faster than an SD card. So what this means is I can record straight to this, take this out, and edit directly off of this drive, which is something I hadn't really thought about doing. I always just ingest straight off the SD cards. And it was only way after when I went to edit the footage off this, I thought, my laptop only has a terabyte of internal storage. So if I was to record even onto big SD cards, or multiple SD cards instead, as soon as I hit 2 hours of footage, I literally can't fit that onto my laptop. So by using these external SSDs, which are much higher speed and much higher capacity, I can just take this out of the camera, plug it into my laptop, and edit directly off of this. And editing off of this is fantastic. The performance is absolutely fine. So yeah, this actually works really well. And it means I don't even need to worry about ingesting the footage or the time it takes to do that. Just edit straight off of this. So yep, that's the SSD there. And on top of that, I need to connect the microphone up. And as I mentioned, this has mini XLR connectors. So for that, I'm just using this basic XLR to mini XLR cable. So yeah, that can go into the side of the recorder and my microphone can plug in there. So that's all fine. What you'll notice here is there's a lot of additional devices I'm sort of setting up around here that I've got to kind of transport and mount near the camera and have attached to the camera basically. So I ended up spending a small fortune and buying a bunch of different mounting accessories from SmallRig to attach it all onto the camera. So we'll take a look now at some B-roll showing the camera setup. So what I ended up doing was using a SmallRig mount that mounts onto the the cold shoe at the front of the camera, which mounts the monitor towards the front of the camera. I then also got a SmallRig SSD mount designed for the Samsung T7 that I've mounted onto the side of the camera where there used to be a shotgun mic holder. And this works really well. I've been able to use this to clamp the USB-C cable in place using one of the fixings so that I can release the other fixing to remove the drive, slot the drive in, it essentially docks onto the USB-C connector that stays in place, and then I can turn the knob to lock the drive in place. So this has actually worked out really, really well. It's in a bit of a weird place and a bit of a weird angle, but it works perfectly fine. And it almost works like a docking station for the SSD, which is great. The other thing I had to mount was my microphone, because I use a Sony ACM77B lavalier microphone, which has a really large XLR connector, because while it is phantom powered, it has the option of putting a AAA battery into the microphone to power it. Or it might be a AA, but anyway, that doesn't matter. But it means that the microphone has a very large XLR connector that needs to be mounted somewhere. So for that, I bought a SmallRig clamp and a cold shoe adapter and mounted that into one assembly. And then onto the back of the handle of my camera, where there's normally a screw thread, I mounted a cold shoe. This meant that I could then mount the microphone to the back of the camera and then connect it into the recorder using that mini XLR to XLR cable. And my logic here between using two cold shoes means that I can easily swap between having the monitor at the front of the camera and the microphone at the rear, and swap to having the microphone at the front of the camera and the recorder at the rear. It's really just a balance thing, so if I wanted to mount it in certain ways or hold it handheld, I may want to swap around where the microphone and the recorder are positioned to sort of adjust the centre of gravity. So that's why I went for that there. And with both of these, they're perfectly secure. You obviously need to be a little bit careful, you don't want the cold shoe slipping out, but what's really good with the SmallRig ones is it has some holes on it around the edges that allow you to put a screwdriver or Allen key in and just use it as a lever to get that really, really tight. And when these are really tight, they seem perfectly secure. So yeah, that's how I've got the camera rig set up, and it works really well. It's definitely something that will evolve over time, and I think long term, once I come to upgrade this camera, I might go back to a mirrorless, but instead actually put a sort of rig around it. But this works really, really well for now. I also ended up buying a really short right-angled HDMI cable, which is perfect for this because it comes out at the correct angle at the back of the camera, routes neatly over the top and into the recorder, and it minimises the amount of loose cables hanging all over the place. So that HDMI cable also really helped. So yeah, that's kind of how I've rigged my camera out, and it works really well. So what we'll now do is we'll quickly take a look at this working, demonstrate a couple of features of it, and we'll talk about some of the performance. So obviously we have the recorder here, so if we turn it on using the button on the side, you'll actually hear the fan ramp up. The fan does make an audible noise. It's not problematic, but it is noticeable. And that's running. There's also a couple of relays in here that click on and off. And when you turn on the phantom power for one of the microphones, you actually hear a relay physically click, which is quite interesting. So as you can see right now, there's nothing happening. It's just sitting there showing a black screen because there's no video fed into it. So we need to supply a video feed. So what I'll do for that now is I'll just do a sort of inception thing and just plug the feed from my camera directly into this because it's easier than trying to feed anything else in. So you're kind of going to see the camera feed in the camera feed, but whatever. So we can plug this into the HDMI port on the side here, into HDMI in, like that. And after a couple of seconds, you should see I've got a video feed on it. And that's working. So we'll take a quick look at a tour of the interface on this, and then we'll take a look at it working. So let's go a little bit closer and take a look. Yeah, very much sort of infinity mirrors type effect here. That's how they're operating. So in the top left here, you'll see you can select the codec. So this is like just select different codecs. So you can go ProRes, HQ, 422, LT, Proxy, all different qualities. There's also DNX HR. I'm using ProRes 422 because it's the best quality that I can really get, apart from HQ, which just uses far too much storage. And because I'm using a Mac, I have built-in ProRes acceleration at a hardware level, so ProRes makes sense over DNX HR. So I'm using ProRes 422. There's also an option for Blackmagic RAW, but that will obviously require a supported camera, which I don't have. So ProRes 422 it is. Up here you can switch between SDI and HDMI. I'm also using HDMI, but it does have SDI. A few other options as well, so you can go into here, you can do things like trigger record. This basically lets the HDMI, and potentially SDI, I'm not sure, trigger recording. So if you had it connected to a camera that supports it, when you start the camera recording on the back of the camera, this will start recording as well. I'm not using any of that. Other things for like if the card drops the frame, so the card isn't writing fast enough, you can say either stop recording or just alert me, which is good. You can go into monitor here, this lets you change different options. Focus assist as well, this is kind of allows you to see which parts are in focus. I prefer having it on coloured lines and red, and what that means is when parts of the picture are in focus, if I turn on the focus assist here, you'll see when parts are in focus, they'll come up red. It just means that the sort of fine edges on things will start flickering red and it shows it's in focus. So that's really useful. A few other options in here as well. So this is where you set the audio settings. This is one of the main reasons I bought this. And what you can see is we're picking up audio on the first two channels. And that's the audio that's coming from the camera over HDMI. So it will record that. Here you can choose how many audio channels you want. So I can say, right, I only want 2 channels. That's just those 2 channels. But if I say I want 4 channels, it now lets me pick which channels I want the XLR inputs on. So currently I've set that to 3 and 4, so my camera's HDMI audio records on channels 1 and 2, and then the XLR inputs record on channels 3 and 4. There's nothing recording onto those currently, but it would record onto those 2 empty channels here. Now you could of course say 1 and 2, and that means that the XLR will record onto 1 and 2, and the HDMI audio from the camera will not be recorded. But personally I like to record the camera's audio as well, just as a backup, or also to sync the audio, because we'll talk about this in a minute. There's a little quirk you might find that I didn't really expect. It's not a problem, but we'll talk about that. But yep, you can use that as well. You can also record even extra channels and put XLR or anything. Essentially it can take in a bunch of different channels over SDI and HDMI. So you can basically say how many you want to record and then put the XLR inputs onto 2 of those. So I'm just recording 4 channels, I'm putting XLRs onto 3 and 4. Here we have the gain levels. This is where you can adjust the gain, so you can switch them between mic level and line level, like that there. And then you can set the gain. I'll need to adjust mine when I've got the microphone connected. I think I had 42 decibels or something. This microphone's got quite a low output. But this is where you can set the XLR inputs for the gain and the switching between mic level and line level. It's also got really good audio metering, much better than a camcorder has. These are really nice big levels that make it really easy to see the audio levels, which is great. Here you can also pad the XLR down by minus 15 decibels. That thing that just basically brings the gain down a lot if the signal's too loud. And this is where you can turn phantom power on and off. And you see when you turn on and off phantom power, you actually hear a click from the device. There's obviously a relay in it controlling the phantom power. So yep, that's how that works. Then there's a bunch of other options here for audio that we won't really go into right now, but you do have these as well. So there's a few other options in here as well. You can set up, this is where you can give the device a name, I don't quite know what that's for, soft reversion, that sort of stuff there. You can get timecode from different things, you can have the timecode come over HDMI, you can feed it in externally, stuff like that. This isn't stuff I've really dealt with before because I don't really work on professional shoots, so I don't really deal with things like timecode. Now here you have the tally LED light and the brightness for that. Essentially on the back of the recorder there's a red LED that lights up when you're recording, so you can adjust the brightness of that to either have it more visible or have it not as bright if it's causing like a shadow on the, or it's lighting up the thing that's in front of the camera too much, so you can adjust that. That's quite nice to have. I also really like this where you can set a file name prefix. This basically means that all your file names have the prefix text that you set here at the start of the file name. So so in this case it's the prefix is test. So all the files recorded off this would be test and then a number. Other options here for things like HDR, which I've not really worked with, and calibrating the screen, which again, I've not really had any use for. You can also apply lookup tables. Now this isn't something I've really ever dealt with, but you can essentially apply lookup tables to the colour that will be displayed on the screen here. So this lets you kind of preview lookup tables that you may be applying in post-production, but it's not really something I've worked with. So yeah, that's it there. Next up, you get some various options for focus assist and metering. So these are accessed by this button in the top left, which pulls up this shortcut at the bottom. And this lets you switch between the different options and turn them on and off. So you've got zebra pattern to show peaking. You can also adjust the threshold on that, at which point it should show the zebra pattern. You've also got focus assist. Again, you can switch between low, medium and high sort of sensitivities. So if you're doing manual focus, that's really good. This here lets you preview potential letterboxing that you may want to apply. You can also put on sort of grid lines to help you sort of align stuff in the picture. You've got other sort of metering here that sort of false colour kind of applies different colours to help you focus. Kind of show different brightnesses. Here you can adjust contrast of the screen, and here you can adjust the brightness of the screen. And the brightness of this screen is mental. It goes super bright. So this screen under super bright light, sunlight, really bright studio lights, you'll have absolutely no problem with it. So I tend to keep this around about 50%, which is still enough under decent studio lighting, and that doesn't drain the battery down too much. But this screen can go super bright, so you're definitely not going to have a problem with that. Finally, there's an option here that adjusts saturation. I don't really know why I would do that. This is all just for the preview. This won't actually affect the recorded footage, but you've got an option to adjust saturation there as well. Next up, there's a section for metering. So this is accessed up here, where you can press this button here, and it lets you put on different types of metering. So you can have a waveform display, which shows the different waveforms. This is very similar to what you see in DaVinci Resolve, and it lets you kind of adjust things like the colour balance and the overall brightness and exposure and work out that sort of stuff. Now, weirdly, all waveforms on this are black and white. They represent colour, but the waves themselves are only white, whereas in DaVinci Resolve, they're red, green and blue waveforms. So it's a bit weird, but it does work. So you can get that to sort of adjust things like colour balance, stuff like that. Now, it's not going to show that much because I'm showing a very basic picture. It's not really that useful or colourful, but it is potentially useful if you want to do more of sort of manual exposure and stuff like that, and you want to view this sort of information. This is much more than you get from a camera, so this is actually really nice to see. You can also put your picture into a sort of smaller picture in the corner and get a much larger waveform, or at least same size waveform, but it's not covered over, it's not sitting on top of the camera's image, which may be better. This may help you view the waveform a bit better. So yeah, these are also really, really nice, especially if you're doing some sort of manual exposure or manual focus adjustment and having that focus assist. This sort of stuff is really, really useful to have. It's also worth bearing in mind that I think when you get this, it doesn't show the video feed behind this. You need to go down to the settings button down here and adjust the background opacity to show the video through. But yeah, these meters, I don't see myself really using them much, but if you're doing a lot of manual exposure stuff, these would be really useful. And ultimately, they could be useful if I ever ran into a situation where I needed them. I'll switch that back to video and that'll get rid of them. There's also a few little shortcuts. For example, down here, if you hit these buttons here, this brings up a shortcut for adjusting the XLR input. So that's nice as well if you need to do that. So I suppose the final thing to do is try and record something. So what we'll do is we'll just use the SSD just as a test. So I'm going to plug that in. So take the SSD using I'm using a Thunderbolt 3 cable here, but it is only USB-C. I just only happen to have a good Thunderbolt 3 cable handy. I'll plug that into the bottom there. And then we'll abuse the cable by sitting at a dodgy angle because this isn't standing up on its own. What you'll now see there is it's detected the SSD. We can go into that, we can see how much record time we've got. So 99 minutes remaining. It's a terabyte drive, but it's already got quite a lot of stuff on it. And that's it there. I've also seen someone mention that you can connect a USB hub to this and actually have multiple SSDs hanging off this, although I've not tried that. Now in terms of the file system format, you'll notice this is formatted with OS X extended. This drive, or this device, supports drives formatted either with the macOS format, so HFS Plus I think that would be, or OS X extended as this calls it, or as exFAT. Now because I use a Mac, I've decided to format these as OS X extended, and this is what Blackmagic recommend, because the macOS file system is journaled, whereas exFAT isn't, and being a journaled file system, it can protect against data corruption or improve file recovery, so that's why I've used that there. So now if we were to record something, all we do is hit the record button there. You can see the timecode starts counting along the top there, and that's now recording to the SSD. Now obviously this recording is a bit pointless because I'm just recording exactly what's coming from the camera and there's no external audio device connected, but if my microphone is connected here, I'd be recording audio as well. You can also you also look at the top, you'll see that tally light's on. It's not showing super brightly on camera, but you can see the reflection on my hand there just about. I am under very bright studio lights. It is actually quite bright in practice. And then we can stop the recording like that. So that works really well. And what's great with this is if you want to play back, so you can hit the play button here, and that'll start playing back the clip. And this is a much nicer interface than my camcorder has, because with this, you've got a nice big seek bar to seek through a clip, you can easily skip between clips, and you've just got a much bigger picture. Whereas on my camcorder, playing back footage is an absolute pain. The only complaint I really have here is that there's no way that I can find to get a thumbnail view of all the files or of all the videos that are on it. It just gives this one big seek bar with all the clips continuously, and these buttons let you skip between them. So it's fine, you can still easily play back clips and skip between them and stuff, and realistically the only clip you're probably going to want to really review is maybe the previous one, if you've got a take that you kind of want to work out how it ended on or whatever. But even though there's a thumbnail view, this is still much nicer to play video back than trying to do it through the camera, so yep, you can play footage back on this as well. Just like that. Finally with this, we have the audio inputs. And this is where I'm really impressed. When I got this, the website did mention good quality preamps or good quality audio inputs or something, but I really didn't know what to expect, and given I was buying this largely for the audio inputs, I was a bit worried that they wouldn't be that good. But the audio inputs on this have actually blown me away. So what we'll first of all do is we'll take a look at some testing I did, because what I did is I did a couple of tests to test the actual preamp noise, because the issue I had with my previous camcorder, or this camcorder, was the noise on the XLR inputs. That was a problem. And I've had issues in the past before with other, say, PCM recorders, where they've also had a bit of sort of preamp noise and stuff like that, and my microphone has quite a low output, so you do need to turn the gain up on the preamps quite high, and that can cause a lot of noise from other devices. So I did some testing. Now I'm going to skim over the testing methodology and how I all did this in this video, but what I'll be doing is next week I'm going to release a sort of short, but I mean I say short, it's my videos, but a brief extra video where I go into a bit more detail of how I tested the preamp noise, because it was kind of an interesting process and I feel people might find that kind of interesting to see how I did it. But essentially, as a very rough idea, what I did is I recorded some audio on a bunch of different devices. So I recorded on this Blackmagic device, I recorded on my camcorder's XLR input, I used my old Tascam DR40X PCM recorder, I even recorded audio into my laptop's docking station, and I used my desktop USB interface. And what I did is I recorded an audio sample with a microphone on all of those devices, and adjusted the gain so that the audio was recording round about the same level, and kind of matching the level it would be at for my normal speech when I'm talking and recording a video. So I'm measuring the noise at the gain level that I would normally be using to record. What I then did was connect a 150 ohm dummy load to each of the devices, and then recorded the silence. And this would be recording the noise floor without any sort of background noise from the room or potential noise from the microphone itself. It would just be recording purely the thermal noise of a resistor, which is obviously very low. So by doing that, it let me compare the noise floor of all these different devices in a fairly repeatable and predictable way. And these are the results. So here you can see all the devices, you can see all the ones I tested. So I tested the camcorder, the Tascam DR40X recorder, I also tested the Tascam DR40X with a Fat Head Phantom preamp, because the DR40X does have quite noisy preamps, and when I used to use that as my main recorder, I bought the Fat Head Phantom external preamp to help reduce the noise floor. I also tested my desktop USB audio interface just for a laugh, and then as an additional comparison, I compared the 3.5mm input on the camcorder to my laptop docking station, just for a test. So first of all, we'll do the main highlight, which is the main thing I was trying to do, was how does the Blackmagic compare to the camcorder's XLR inputs? Well, as you can see here, the camcorder's XLR input has a noise floor of -67 decibels. The Blackmagic, -92 decibels. Now of course these are decibels, so the lower the better. The lower the number here, the lower the noise floor, and of course they're negative numbers, so -92 is significantly lower than -67. So as you can see, it's absolutely night and day. The noise floor is so much lower on the Blackmagic compared to the camcorder. In fact, if we introduce my USB audio interface, which is not a high-end, but a decent Behringer desktop USB audio interface that's quite well known for having very low noise preamps, you can see the Blackmagic is actually slightly lower noise than the desktop USB audio interface. Now of course with this there'll be some level of margin of error between these, so I'm not going to say that the Blackmagic's better than the desktop USB audio interface, but what this shows is that the XLR inputs on the Blackmagic are at least roughly comparable to a dedicated USB audio interface. As another comparison, we have my Tascam DR40X recorder, which is an external PCM recorder that I used to use with my mirrorless camera before I got the camcorder. And as you can see, the DR40X on its own already has lower noise than the camcorder. But when I used that recorder, I actually deemed the noise to be too high and bought an external Fethead Phantom preamp. Essentially what this does is it connects in line between the microphone and the recorder and gives 18 decibels of low noise gain to the microphone, which means that the preamps on the recorder can be set to a much lower gain, which will reduce their noise. And as you can see with the Fethead installed, the noise of the DR40X was significantly lower. However, even then, it was still much noisier than the Blackmagic. And previously I was perfectly happy with the noise floor of the DR40X and Fethead Phantom. And well, the Video Assist even lower, so even better. Now because people are probably wondering, I did try the Fethead Phantom with the camcorder and with the Blackmagic just for a laugh, but in both of those situations it actually increased the noise floor by a couple of decibels. The reason being is that the Fethead only really works in a situation where your preamps are noisy at higher gains, but reducing the gain also reduces the amount of noise. In the case of the camcorder, the noise is present no matter what gain the preamps are set to. The noise does get louder at higher gains, but really at any sort of gain, even at the minimum gain, there's still a really loud noise floor, so the Fethead didn't really help there. And using it with a Video Assist also increased the noise floor, just because the Video Assist is already so low noise, you're not getting any benefit from the Fethead, and the Fethead itself will have some slight noise just because it's a preamp, so it just adds a little bit of noise into it, so there was no benefit using it there either. Then as a final test I did, which is nothing to do with Blackmagic, but I thought it would be worth mentioning, is I tested the noise floor of my camcorder's 3.5mm input and compared it to my desktop laptop docking station just because it's the only other device I had that had a 3.5mm microphone input. The reason I tested this was because while I was using the XLR connections on the camera, if the 3.5mm jack on the camera was better, I could have used that instead and got a different microphone. However, as you can see here, the noise floor of the camera's 3.5mm input is even worse than the XLR inputs, and is significantly worse than even a laptop docking station that is not designed for hi-fi or high precision audio at all. The docking station probably has as equivalent sort of sound quality or noise floor to a PC sound card or a cheap USB sound card adapter thing. Yet even that has a significantly lower noise floor than the camcorder's 3.5mm input. So yeah, the camcorder's 3.5mm input is absolutely rubbish. The XLR input is also pretty rubbish, but the 3.5mm is just even worse. So yeah, that was the results there. And as you can see, the Video Assist has an extremely low noise floor, and that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted a really low noise floor, so I don't need to have to use noise reduction plugins or anything like that. I can just take the audio straight off the recorder, maybe EQ it a little bit, apply some compression, but that's really it. And the audio quality out of this is fantastic, and the video I most recently filmed with this and edited, I was able to edit all the audio, and the audio quality is brilliant. I'm so happy with it. It's the best audio I've been able to record so far, so yeah, dead happy with it. Now one other test I did, just for a bit of a laugh, was I measured the EIN. I'll go into this in my more detailed video, but essentially the EIN is a standardised measurement for measuring the noise floor of a preamp, irrespective of what the gain of the preamp is. Essentially what you do is you measure the noise floor at the maximum gain of the preamp, and then from that result you subtract the gain that was applied. So if the preamp adds 50 decibels of gain, you measure the noise floor and subtract 50 decibels from the end result. And theoretically, using a 150 ohm resistor dummy load, which is what I used, the best EIN you could get in a perfect situation would be minus 130 decibels. And as you can see from the results here, the Video Assist and the Behringer desktop interface get basically within touching distance of that perfect EIN. 129.74 decibels on the Blackmagic and 129.55 decibels on the Behringer interface. Now if you compare it to the other options, you can see the Tascam with the Fethead Phantom's 124 decibels, which is usable, but obviously a lot higher. The DR40X, I measured 106 decibels, or negative 106 decibels, which is getting to the point that's noisy and not really acceptable. And lots of reviewers of the DR40X complain that the preamps are too noisy and the EIN shows too high a noise floor. And then way in the lead we have the camcorder with a negative 95 decibels EIN, which is just ridiculous. I'm starting to wonder how Panasonic even get this product to the market, because it is just so noisy. Like, the fact that, you know, they sell this optional top handle to provide the XLR inputs, and that's the result, it's just not really suitable for professional use at all. So yeah, that's the EIN results I just kind of measured for a laugh. But I will also say, bear in mind that disclaimer on the bottom. The EIN figure is designed to kind of be a standardised figure, so you can use it to compare lots of different devices on the market. If you're buying an audio recorder or an audio interface, the manufacturer might publish the EIN value, and you can use that to compare to other devices. Now, I have measured these EIN values, and to the best of my knowledge, these are correct. However, bear in mind, I was using a homemade dummy load. I was testing it, you know, at home. I was using Audacity to do the measurement. I wasn't really doing it with professional calibrated equipment. So these EIN values are perfectly fine to compare between all these different devices here, because I'm confident that's accurate. But if you wanted to compare these EIN values to, say, manufacturer provided EIN values, bear in mind that my values aren't necessarily guaranteed to be accurate. So just bear that in mind. There's a disclaimer. They might be accurate and you can compare, but I wasn't doing this professionally with proper equipment or anything. But yeah, that was some EIN values I measured there. So it's all well and good seeing the noise floor presented in graphs, but the next thing is to listen to it. So what I did is I recorded the bare noise floor of each of these devices, and then I amplified all the recordings by the same amount to make the noise floor much more audible, and I'll play those for you now. So bear in mind with each of these recordings, this recording has been amplified, but all the recordings have been amplified by the exact same amount, so the relative difference in noise floor between each recording will be the same. So I'll play a few different combinations of them and playing in different orders so you can hear the transitions between them, and I'll put text on the screen explaining which recording you're listening to. And what you'll see here, or hear here, is how much lower noise the Blackmagic is compared to the camcorder, and how much higher noise the camcorder is than any of the other options. So yeah, let's go through those now. So yeah, hopefully from that you'll be able to see, first of all, how bad this camcorder is for noise floor, and second of all, how low noise the Blackmagic is. Finally, what we'll do is we'll listen to the recording of me just talking as I normally would in a YouTube video. So what you're now listening to is me talking into the microphone connected into the camcorder directly, and as I've done with most of my videos for the last year or so I've had this camera, I've got a noise reduction plugin applied. So what I'll do is I'll go silent for a second, and in the middle of that silence I'll turn off the noise reduction plugin so you can hear what it sounds like without that noise reduction plugin. The noise floor will go up, so you'll hear the noise a lot more, although it does maybe remove a little bit of sort of digital artifact that the plugin introduces. So I'll go silent now and turn the noise reduction plugin off. And what you're now hearing is me without the noise reduction plugin on. The overall audio will sound fairly similar, maybe a little bit better, but there will be a much more noticeable background noise. And this is the issue with this camera. You either have to use a noise reduction plugin, which doesn't work perfectly and seems to reduce the overall audio quality, or deal with a very high noise floor like you're hearing now. But what we'll now do is we'll switch over to the Blackmagic for audio, and you'll hear how much better this sounds. And what you're now listening to is the audio being recorded directly into the Blackmagic Video Assist. And I'm sure you'll agree, the noise floor on this recording is so much lower than it was through the camcorder. The sound quality out of this is absolutely excellent, and there's no need for me to use any sort of noise reduction plugins. And finally, we're back to the camcorder with the noise reduction plugin applied. So hopefully you can tell from that and you'd agree how much better the audio quality out of this is. The noise floor is just so much lower, and it gives much more ability to adjust and compress the audio and apply EQ to it. It's just so much better. So yeah, while this wasn't a cheap device, And while, yeah, using a whole dedicated external video recorder for this just to solve an audio quality issue is a bit overkill, I'm so happy with how this worked. So yeah, that was the audio test there. So now we're back listening to the audio being recorded through the Blackmagic, and this is where there's one final quirk that I wasn't really expecting, but it's something I can totally deal with, but it's just worth bearing in mind. And that is the audio sync. Because obviously what I'm doing here is I'm recording the video coming out of the camera over HDMI into the recorder. This is also recording the audio from the camera itself, and I'm separately recording the audio from the microphone. However, the camera, because it's having to produce this digital HDMI signal, there's always going to be a very slight delay on this HDMI video coming into the recorder, which means that the video that's being recorded alongside the audio is going to be slightly delayed. Different cameras have different delays. On my camera it's not too bad. I've measured the delay to be round about 5 frames, which at 50 frames a second isn't deadly, but that's kind of the absolute maximum you could really have before it would start noticing the audio being out of sync, especially if there's someone talking in front of the camera. This is particularly important because obviously by design, with how this would work, the audio would come before the video, and people are generally much more susceptible to noticing the audio coming too early than the audio being delayed slightly. Now, one way you can notice this is if I play the audio that's being recorded from the camera at the same time as the audio that's coming in from the external microphone. And if I do that now, you'll hear a very slight or a fairly noticeable echo. And that echo is because the audio from my microphone is coming before the audio that's coming from the camera. And the audio that's coming from the camera is perfectly in sync with the video, so you can imagine the video is also slightly delayed. So I'll stop that now because that's quite annoying. But this is something to bear in mind. For the sort of stuff I'm doing with these general YouTube videos, you probably wouldn't really notice it unless I made a sudden noise by, say, dropping something. But especially if you're recording someone standing in front of a camera and they were talking to the camera, you may notice the audio sync. Now this is a little bit annoying on Blackmagic's front, because all they would need to do to resolve this is add an option in the Blackmagic to delay the audio coming in from the external device, and just delay the audio by a configurable amount of time, and all you need to do is set that delay to a value in milliseconds or a value in frames, and it would delay the audio and that would be fine. But unfortunately this doesn't have that feature, which is really annoying. So hopefully in the future Blackmagic will add a feature to let you delay the audio, and that would totally get rid of this issue. But for now I found a decent workaround. Essentially all I do is in DaVinci Resolve when I'm importing the footage, I use one of the options in Resolve to extract the audio from all the video files. That literally takes a couple of seconds to run, literally no time at all. And what that then gives me is for each video file, it'll give me a WAV audio file with all of the audio tracks from that video file in it. So that WAV file will include the audio from the camcorder as well as all the audio from the Blackmagic from being recorded from the external microphone. All I then do is I change the clip attributes on all those WAV files to only include the audio track that was recorded from the microphone, and I then change the clip attributes for all the video files to only include the audio that was recorded from the camera's built-in microphone, which I'm using as scratch audio. Once I've done that, I then use Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve's built-in sync audio based on waveform feature, and that perfectly syncs the video files up with those WAV files, and it brings the audio from the microphone perfectly in line with the audio from the camera's built-in mic. And realistically, for me doing that, it takes a matter of seconds. I can probably sync all the audio in under a minute, so it's not really a problem, but it is just something to bear in mind. And it does mean that if you're using a device in this way, you would really need some sort of external audio device, some sort of microphone that's recording directly into the camera to use as scratch audio. It's not a problem here because obviously my camera's got a built-in microphone and I stand next to the camera, so realistically when I'm filming, the camera's microphone's always going to be picking me up. But it could be worth bearing in mind, especially if you're using some sort of wireless microphone setup that's recording directly into this, where the person that's speaking to the microphone is going to be too far away from the camcorder for the camcorder's microphone to pick them up. You may need to think about how you're going to sync that audio up. But yeah, that's just something to bear in mind, is that because this doesn't have a feature to delay the audio, which I wish it had, you may find that your audio coming in from the external inputs may come before the video input, the video signal, by a couple of frames. The audio might be a few frames ahead of time, which is a little bit annoying, but just something to bear in mind. So there you go. That was a look at the 7-inch Blackmagic Video Assist 12G, and I'm super happy with it. Obviously it was massive overkill for me to get this just to solve the audio problem. However, I was looking at getting an external monitor anyway, and for that it's also been really good. Plus being able to record at ProRes and also record onto external SSDs is also a really nice benefit. And I can't wait to produce more videos using this, because the overall audio quality just gives me so much more power to EQ it and compress it and do all that sort of stuff without introducing noise. I'm just so happy with this thing, and I really can't fault it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. And if you're interested in buying any of the stuff shown in this video, there's links in the description.